When I look at what are Native people in the Great Lakes or in Minnesota doing during the suffrage era, we were also facing the aftermath of that big dispossession that the allotment policies had caused that called for the breakup of tribal lands in the early 20th century. There was a new poverty that Ojibwe people were experiencing, and Native children are going off to government boarding schools. Really tremendous problems that Native people are facing, because what Native people were supposed to get in exchange for all the losses they'd suffered in terms of their land was citizenship. For the vast number of Native people, when we think of the suffrage era, we weren't citizens of the United States. My grandfather, who was in World War I, was not a citizen of the United States.
While not formally citizens of the United States, Indigenous women had always played crucial roles as tribal leaders.
For Ojibwe people, formal politics was predominantly the role of men, but women were really in control of the economy. And so I think the way we've come to understand the way men and women worked was, I think the term we use is complementarity, that there was a kind of equality.
This cultural tradition of equity and involvement gave Native women a unique perspective and thrust transcendent suffragists from tribal communities into the foreground of the movement.
A Dakota woman named Zakala Shah, who was also known as Gertrude Simmons Bonin, and she was a Yankton woman who was very outspoken about Native people gaining citizenship. And she was part of an organization that formed in 1911 in the United States called the Society of American Indians.
In 1916, the Society of American Indians met in the Midwest. This would be a homecoming for one of its most notable members. Marie Bottineau Baldwin was one of the first Native American women in the U.S. to graduate from law school. She worked in Washington, D.C. with the Office of Indian Affairs.
She was from the Turtle Mountain community in North Dakota. I tend to place her with this interesting generation of people who were active in the Indian service and who held jobs in Washington, Native activists and writers in the early 20th century.
The Turtle Mountain Ojibwe band member had Minnesota roots. She attended high school in Minneapolis where, as the daughter of a pioneer family and lawyer J.B. Bottineau, she was a person of note. Described as highly educated, Bottineau Baldwin is said to have pursued a legal career to advocate for her people. During her long tenure in the Office of Indian Affairs, she navigated the two worlds she inhabited, one of American politics and policy, the other of her tribe and traditions. The bicultural bearing would also show up in her suffrage work. In the build-up to the dramatic suffrage parade of 1912, she was asked by organizers to create a float invoking Native themes. She pushed back on what might have felt like a cliched and contrived concept.
I have not yet decided whether to obey the request of the parade rangers or not. As for the Indian women, they have had virtual suffrage, also the power of recall, since time immemorial.